that post earlier, man. I appreciate that. A lot of folks don't. Like I try to do my due diligence in getting the word out about what we're doing, and a lot of my guests they don't spend any time with that, so it's all right.
Yeah,
But
that's all good. Yeah, I like to get the word out to as many networks as I have access to, and then whatever people are drawn as a magnet to the conversation are the ones that need to hear the message.
yeah, no, I'm with you there. That's it's hard. I don't think either one of us or anyone that I've met is going to force feed a conversation. He's got to. I remember some of my stumble upon's is like, where the crap is this been? And I talk to friends like, oh yeah, I've been listening to that for years. I'm like, oh wow. But I also appreciate those stumble upon's because there's been a lot of times when I realized I wasn't ready for that message. I've gone back and listened to stuff or revisited a book that didn't speak to me before. And
Mm.
you might be like, here, this is for you, this review, and I listen to them like that ain't for me. But going back after I've grown or a few evolutions of life go by me, is it some of those older things or things that I missed or timing? I think it's something to be said for that, dude.
That's right. It's something to be said about going back to the ancient wells because that's one of the things that our ancestors did. Abraham and a lot of the people in biblical history as well too went back to rediscover wells that were established for many years prior, and they had divine inspiration from revisiting those places. I agree, 100%.
Taylor, I will tell everybody who to talk to, but I wanted to tell you one of the places that I was telling you about my other podcast I'm doing the blind.
Yeah.
Um, my inspiration for that comes from the Book of Thomas.
Hmm.
Um, and reading about the Book of Thomas, it was not those are supposed to be credited. If you do deep research, a large majority of those are credited as sayings of Jesus, and
Yep.
and then there's some Gnostic and some other stuff where they've kind of put some variables in. Some mystics did some work on it as well, so that's why it's kind of this book that's on a shelf, and
Right.
there's not a lot of information out there on it. So, man. I think for me, the more the controversy around the work is, the more that I track to it because I enjoy, um, that part of it. So that's what I've been doing. The name of that podcast, dude, I don't want to steal any more of your time, but it's called Endodyne. And the whole premise is power from within. And when I stumbled upon that book, when I had the idea about the other one, I was like, all right, look, I'm not going to disregard this time into this conversation. So I started doing some work on it, man. And
Nice.
you ever do a project, Caleb, to where it's just like when you're on it, it's not that you're excited to do it, but like your words don't really munch up. You record it once, you're not record
Yep.
like that's where I am with this project. Like it's just flowing really well for me.
That's good. Yeah, if it flows well and it's part of, and this is something I'm really looking forward to discussing our conversation, it's part of the DNA of your design, Jeff,
Yeah.
then that's something you're supposed to pursue because what you're supposed to pursue is going to look like different than what I pursue and our audience pursues. It's about really finding our own unique purpose. And I think in a world, I believe in a world that says, oh, well, unless you do it like A plus B equals C, or do it like Tony Robbins, or do it like Kim Kardashian or Taylor Swift, or do it like Ronaldo or LeBron James, or do it like all the successful people, then somehow you're not a success if you don't do it scripted like they do it. But I would say to counteract that, that's a conform culture because in the
Yeah.
words of conformity is the term con and formation. And a con job of the biggest con formation that we've seen in our age, I believe, is this conformity to just conform. Is this con job to conform to the crowd think? You ever see like that image of like the one goldfish that's swimming in the opposite direction, and you have like 30 blue fish swimming in the opposite direction? It's
Yeah.
like, okay, go against the grain. And that's really what we have to do to pursue our DNA of design, don't we? Because in a world that encourages conformity and having to do it formulated, there can be some of those peer pressures to try to give in to peer pressure from other people and other cultures and mindsets. But really, when you and I and our audience listening to right now, you walk in the DNA of your design, it will cost you. But when you do that and you're truly in something that gives you joy and fulfillment, there is nothing that you can put a price tag on something like that.
The thing I wanted to tag on to what you said too is I grew up Southern Baptist in a very, probably 6 years or so, very heavily into, me and my mom went to church on a regular. So the influence comes from a very traditional, old school, grew up rural, that small white church in the neighborhood type thing, right? So there's a little bit of, where I had to really work through that because I knew that that's really what I wasn't. I really appreciate all the things, but got to a certain point to where I was like, that's just not, I don't know. I didn't like it. But as I started doing more work for myself, to speak to what you said, was it, man, it really, I started pursuing something that I fit, made me feel good. But when I
Mm.
research it, Caleb, when I research it, it's questionable. And it's not, like I said, it's that book on the shelf. And when what you just told me there, man, I can hang up, walk away now. Because you gave me that nudge of like, cause I was absolutely doing what I preach to people about: following your gut. Don't let other influences, it's a part. So I really preach it, but then I was struggling taking a little bit of my own medicine just because of, it's religion. It's edgy.
Yep.
Yeah, I think sometimes for me is getting comfortable with it. Could be how it's going to be received is how someone's going to receive it, and I'm just there to put it out there and see how it sticks, right? Or help educate folks on it, man.
One
Um,
100%. Yeah, brother.
I
Awesome.
I really appreciate you, like your the way you opened up with me on that. Let me tell everyone, because we jumped in and I read a whole lot about you, and I, like, again some of the similar, we have a lot of commonalities, and it's rare in my circles to find that commonality because it's intuitive, it's different approach to things, and from that spiritual world that I enjoy the journey that it's put me on, but finding someone else that is along those same lines. So let me tell everyone who I'm talking with today for the next. I said 45 minutes, but man, I feel like we're gonna be over multiple episodes by the time we're done. But I am sitting with Caleb Matthews today, a man who walked away from corporate comfort to follow a calling most people ignore. Caleb helps people interpret their dreams, recognize the signals in their lives, and reconnect with the clarity that leads to transformation. His work blends intuition, spiritual awareness, and real world strategy. This was going to stretch your mind and ground your spirit at the same time, folks. Like I said, is an amazing way to open this one up
Mm.
with a little bit of tactical, right? A little bit of tactical thoughts, a little bit of how to, a little bit of me on things that I'm doing. But folks, I've been doing a lot of work in this area. I work with, I have a couple intuitive ladies that I work with. Nancy Olson's one of them, and then I got a couple of the police officers that have been around me, dude, from that side of the world. Nancy, she does a lot of work in crime. She's an intuitive investigator, and
Wow.
she follows that path. So a lot of our conversations through that, but this is a unique one to me because it's leadership, and
Yep.
it's all for that, man. But tell me what a day in your world looks like, dude.
Day in my world, really, when I wake up and give thanks to God for having breath, because really, before anything starts, before hopping onto the computer, getting on Podmatch, getting on Matchmaker FM, networking with podcasters and sowing seed into the ether, so to speak, before any of that gets started, or looking into my itinerant oasis business, because that's my second business I have, where I rent out an executive condo here in San Jose del Cabo, Mexico, for digital nomads and business
Yep.
professionals. Those are my two jobs. So I manage two businesses. Before I get started on any of the management of my two businesses, I start off with gratitude in my heart, gratitude on my speech. And that is to invite the Zoe life, the life force of God into my day. And in a busy world, it can be so distracting to get started on the hamster wheel of just getting into structure, right away, getting into that construct of just jumping on the wheel, hustle, 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 and get to it. But it's good to be focused, but I want to emphasize this to our audience as we begin. It is good to be focused. It's good to be planned. It's good to have structure. But for me in my day, what I start off with before my structure in this physical world is I start with a posture of heart, and that is to invite the Zoe life of God, the Spirit of God, into my day, because without the breath of God, it is my strong conviction that we have nothing. If we don't have the breath of God in us, then we have absolutely nothing. So my day begins with inviting that breath of God, inviting God, thanking God for another day. Give us this day our daily bread. And that I try to ask and seek God, the Father, of seeing the links in my day by day. Like even today, God, show me the links that are going to be a part of my day, a part of my conversation, part of my interactions in athletics and walking on the street, talking to the Mexican locals here in Cabo, and etc. Then I get into that place, and then as the day goes on, I start to get into, okay, these 2 or 3 hours after coming back from a morning of pickleball like I came from this morning, now it's time to get into pod match. It's time to get into YouTube creating. And so these elements build on each other. But I would say my day begins, and a day looks like for me a balance. Because if I'm not balanced, if I'm just playing all the time, I'm not going to be focused on my mission. Of course, we're supposed to have fun with it, but if we have too much fun, we don't focus on why we're here and what message we're pursuing and communicating, we can get lost in the shuffle. In the same token, if I'm too focused on constantly pouring out, constantly giving, constantly sowing into other people, then my tank is going to be running on empty. And we have to balance that within our trichotomous being. So I want to ask you a question, Jeff. And of course, our audience listening maybe think, what is a trichotomous being? But I want to ask you, have you ever heard of the worldview of the trichotomous worldview versus the dichotomous worldview?
No, I hadn't, man. I feel like there's three layers there somewhere, man. But educate us.
Yeah, so the trichotomous worldview is more relevant and prevalent in Eastern culture. I've done a lot of traveling over the last 20 plus years of doing motivational public speaking. And I find in the Eastern cultures, they're more geared towards spirit, soul, and body. That's the trichotomous being, because it is my conviction that God created humanity, created male and female in his image in the Garden of Eden, in his likeness. And we are made with a spirit that has a mind, will, and emotions, that has a body. So our spirit, our life force, our mind, will, and emotions, and our body, that's our trichotomous being. Now, the dichotomous being in Western culture, especially out here in North America and in Europe, in this hustle culture of, mind, will, and emotions, information, knowledge, understanding, accumulate that understanding. Okay, body, working out, keeping active, keeping healthy, goals, 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 knowledge, 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 understanding, understanding. That's good. But without the life force of the spirit, the dichotomous being is only part of the picture, and it's not the complete picture. And if we leave the spirit out, from our lives, the life force of God from our lives, we are limiting ourselves. We are capping ourselves from acceleration in our DNA of design. That's what I'm talking about within the DNA of design. Every single person listening to right now, us, me and Jeff having this conversation, YouTube, online, podcast, those listen afterwards, you have a spirit that has a soul, that has a body, and there's a whole world to explore within the DNA of your design. It's a very, very fascinating thing, isn't it?
Yeah, no doubt, man. Just when you get into and I kept stumbling and stumbling. Like I say, I'm not educated by no way into this stuff, but I kept stumbling through the conversations and directing to, and ultimately this path leads me to you, right? If we look at um, those type moments, but so for me was I started off on this path of come out a little bit of adverse childhood, all the things, right? Grew up at setback after setback, trying to figure all of it out, and I started podcasting to have the conversation and to work with like-minded individuals and kind of this was a little bit of Jeff therapy here was all the conversations, but then also along the way is being able, Caleb, is telling folks like, hey, there's certain conversations when you look at someone, you go, hey man, you really need to forgive yourself. Just think about, so a little bit of where I started learning more about and following and finding into that spiritual side was through just my conversations and helping people get right with themselves or what have you. What I realized along the way was just there was a little bit of missing piece with me, and really researching and getting into my own spiritual journey and started talking to friends who I'd known for 20 years, and they're like, hey, just so you know, hey, there was this little confessional between all of us where we're like, hey, I'm really pursuing some more spiritual learning these days. Some folks are over on the Christianity path, some folks are over here, over there, whatever that might be. But there's an element, and like you said, I feel like someone by a close network, but I was missing the tribe. I was so that's how I stumbled into upon this, and to have you teach me about, hey, this is what you were missing right off the kind of out the cuff,
It's
man. It's super powerful.
it's amazing how the sea links of our lives really intersect, don't they? Like these
Yeah.
divine nudges, these divine intersections. I think of it as like the intersection of a highway. Like the astounding thought is if you and I jump into our vehicle, wherever we are right now, where I am in Mexico, where you are in Virginia, I think you're based
Yep.
out of Virginia, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
And you get in your car and you go to one of the main traffic lights, and then there's somebody else that's coming up to the other side of the traffic light. That encounter is never going to be replicated the exact same way ever again. Never
Yeah.
again, the same exact way. But the fact that you decided at such and so time of the day to get up and go out, do some errands, and another person across town or in the city decide they're going to do it at the same time, your paths intersect. And I do not believe that there's anything that happens by chance. There's no coincidences. There's always a purpose behind something. Now, our audience may be thinking of that, saying, "Caleb, what are you talking about? You mean to say that there is a purpose even behind darkness or when bad things happen?" I do believe that good can come out of evil. So if something that is meaning to be against you or an obstacle or a season of difficulty, God can still redeem that. There is no valley too deep that God cannot redeem in our DNA of design, in our bloodline, in our inheritance, in our lives. There's nothing outside of the scope of God. And for me, as a communicator, as someone who's been doing this for 20 plus years in Africa, the Philippines, around the world, my first audience, and I want to bring myself in a humble level down because this is one of my things, one of my late mentors who's passed away many years ago, he always taught me as a communicator, as I get into my message on the stage, in person or online, that you always share a human element about you so that people don't think, oh man, how could I ever measure up to that? Like, surely that person doesn't have any flaws as a communicator or this or that. Well, yes, everyone's got their flaws. For me, my first audience was not people. It was my collection of stuffed animals when I was a teenager. I have a collection of over 100 stuffed animals, and I have one stuffed animal I was given to my blue teddy bear named Sammy, and he was given to me the day I was born 38 years ago, and he's been my friend ever since. When I was a 5 or 6-year-old boy, I decided one day that it would be a very logical thing to do, a very smart thing to do, to take his heart out, because he had like one of those heart-to-heart baby bear things that would like glow and like vibrate, pull it out of him and flush it down the toilet, because I thought that, oh, it's cool. I want to see his heart go down the toilet. So you could say that I broke my teddy bear's heart, but, flushed his heart down the toilet, but still my teddy bear forgave me for that. But still, over the years, I would speak to my teddy as if I was speaking to people, because I knew from a young age I always had a passion, my DNA of design, to communicate, to inspire, to motivate. My nickname when I was a teenager was TTM, talk too much. And I trained myself to speak to an audience. Before it was people, it was my stuffed animal. So that when I stood up for the first time in front of the orphans in Kenya and Africa, when I stood up for the first time in front of the Bible college in Nyahururu in Kenya, in front of 30 or 40 people that were twice or 3 times my age, sharing with them, I didn't have that fear. And I can honestly say that I had excitement. I had the butterflies of excitement, but it wasn't fear. It was, okay, these people are no different than my stuffy. I'm just going to talk to them exactly like my stuffy is, and like a friend, and go for it from there. But I wanted to share that to encourage your audience. Start small. Start where you are. Start with what's in your hand. What is in your hand? All throughout the Bible, we hear God ask this question to all the leaders and heroes and men and women in the scriptures and in history. What is in your hand? Like one of the favorite cartoons that I have, I'm not sure if you've seen this cartoon, Jeff, but you probably have in our audience, The Prince of Egypt. One of my favorite cartoons of all time. DreamWorks, amazing animation that really put animation on the map. And Moses, the great famous story of Moses and delivering the people of Israel out of Egypt, God said, Take the staff in your hand, Moses. So I ask our audience this: within the DNA of your design, think back to the early years of entrepreneurship, when you were a child, when you were in your young age group growing up. What did you have in your hand that was special to you that maybe everybody else thought was silly or didn't fit with them? Think about that. And as me and Jeff converse in this conversation, start to just chew on that, because that is a key. It's a clue, a C link in your young early years that is developing you. Maybe you didn't know it, developing you into who you are as a leader, as an entrepreneur, and as an innovator.
Dude, how for um you have walked way miles and miles and miles through this journey. And it's very evident, man. You have absolutely put the work in. But there's a point in time when you're sitting in a corporate office. Is that Caleb present then that's present now type with the same attitude? Did you always have this spiritual work and this drive, the way that you process things? You always have that, or you're 11 years in a corporate and you was like, I'm done with this. I'm gonna go chase something else. What was that?
Yeah.
How was things back then, or did you? Has this always been who you are, or did you discover this, Caleb?
This has always been who I am, and I felt like the corporate world was a pit stop, a long pit stop. It was a very
Mm,
long pit stop along the way in this journey. And I'm going to try to elaborate on this as bullet point as I can. But the reason why I went back to the corporate world for 10 or 11 years was because I spent the first quarter of my life. I was raised in a homeschooling home, by the way. I think I heard you say homeschooling earlier, but I was a homeschooler, and I'm glad for it. My mother raised me and my two older brothers as homeschoolers. We're all a year and a half apart. My middle brother, he works for Air Canada in Vancouver in Canada. He's a flight service director for several thousand employees. And then my oldest brother lives in Paraguay, and he's a digital marketer. He operates with AI and AI marketing and just really deep tech stuff, like way, a
yeah.
lot of that stuff way over my head. But we were homeschoolers. We were raised in a homeschooling environment, and I was raised on the teachings of Jesus and of the Bible, not religion, because I want to emphasize that there's a huge difference between the monetized Christian Constantinianism that's being preached today across megachurches and pulpits in North America and the world versus the humble message of Jesus that he preached in the Gospels, where he said that he made himself of no reputation. And part of the fight for me and my family growing up, part of being involved with several different ministries and supporting people in international countries, and also funding ourselves. Like one of my first jobs as an entrepreneur, we talk about early years of entrepreneurship, and this will all make sense connecting to answer your question. But Back to Eden Landscaping, my mother had this business called Back to Eden Landscaping for 20, 25 years in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. And as a young teenager, me and my brothers, we got to work, after our homeschooling or between homeschooling hours, we'd work long days, long 8, 11, 12-hour days. And we worked for some of the wealthiest clients like Jim Shaw, Murray Edwards, Shay Gifford, just Burnco Rock, like people who, Jim Shaw, like he's one of the big telecom carriers in Canada, Murray Edwards, owner of the Calgary Flames, like some wealthy clients, and learned how to do that from a young age. So we funded ourselves through the landscaping business. We didn't have a ministry pay our way. We funded ourselves to go to places like Kenya, to go to places like Uganda, Rwanda, Tanzania, Philippines, and fund our own way and make our own connections. And we dared to try to bring a message of Martin Luther. Now, Martin Luther is one of my favorite heroes, in history, the great reformer, the one that nailed the 95 thesis to the door at Wittenberg of reformation, calling for reformation within the church, within the body of Christ, because it was consumed with indulgences and mediators and hierarchy. And he wanted to bring a correction to a lot of just the gap that was between what he was reading in the Gospels versus what was being portrayed in the present day. Why do I share all that? Well, because my family and I, for a big chunk of our lives, and even before I was born, we've been fighting for this message that everybody plays. And what do I mean by that? Well, everybody is supposed to be a kingdom of priests, because it says that in the book of Exodus. It says that in the book of 1 Peter, that it was always God's intention from the Garden of Eden that everybody should be able to be equal before God, and nobody was higher up than each other. No mediator between God and man. There's no there's no mediation because Jesus came to fulfill mediation, to tear the veil and to restore us back to Eden. Most of the body of Christ in the world, and most of the Christian church, is living in post-curse, pre-cross, instead of living in pre-curse, post-cross. What do I mean by that? Well, post-curse, pre-cross was, oh, the woman, your desire shall be your husband, and he shall rule over you. Well, male dominance was never a thing in the Garden of Eden. I might be rattling some cages there for some guys listening saying, what are you talking about? Well, it's true. There was no man's over top of the woman in the Garden of Eden. Male and female walked side by side with God as equals. And a result of the curse was that the ground would resist man, but also that the woman would be ruled by her husband. That was a result of the curse. Well, Jesus came to be the curse so that he could fulfill the curse and fulfill the law and the prophets and become a curse so that we could be back to Eden as a kingdom of priests. And that's the message my family and I preached for many, many decades. And unfortunately, we received much persecution, much kickback from the organized system, because the organized system of elites doesn't like to be challenged. And, oh, well, not just the guys in the suits and the ones standing at the front can do all the ministry and the stuff. It's supposed to be for everybody. Well, elite people who run on the dollar of their ministry and they make a greed living off of the gospel don't like to hear that. They want to keep people in the pews and they want to keep people underneath. And that is the reason why I pivoted to the corporate world, because unfortunately, the organized church would not receive my message and my family's message. And so I think, okay, I need to go to the corporate world. I spent 11 years in the corporate world, and there reached a point after the 11 years where I tried to offer to my boss, my manager, after winning all the awards, after being successful and winning the trips and being one of the top salespeople in telecommunications in that industry. I said, hey, I have an idea. And I even ran it by executives and people high up in the corporate world, higher up than my boss. And I said, I have this idea where I want to work 6 months in Mexico and 6 months in Canada, and I'll work online from where I am, and I'll drive traffic to the stores. And when I come back, I'll support the stores and roam between them, because I'd reached that place of authority where I'd given 10 years to this company. And I'll never forget this, Jeff. Never forget this, because we're talking about leadership. Audience, check this out. My old boss looks at me and he says, oh, Caleb, online sales doesn't work. And I almost dropped the phone. I was like, what planet are you living in? What era are you living in? I was thinking. I didn't say that to him, of course, but online sales doesn't work is what he told me. And I figured, okay, in that moment, after all that I've given, all that I've invested in this corporate world, after all the loyalty that I've given to this company, and I'm told that, oh, it doesn't work, I'm not going to celebrate your DNA of design, because I was even able to take a pay decrease to say, hey, I'll test this out, and if after 6 months or a year this doesn't work, we can revert back to square one. But let me try this out. Let me beta test this idea. They wasn't even willing to try. And I knew from that day on that my DNA of design was not going to be celebrated in that place. And so I pivoted back to moving. I sold the house in Canada. I left the job. I left a comfortable life, and I moved to Mexico, bought the condo, started the itinerant Oasis. And then recently, here in the last 2 or 3 months, I have began the C-Link and really gone hard on Podmatch and Matchmaker FM and YouTube and all of my connections to really continue communicating, because that's my DNA design. I'm good at sales. I'll gladly do sales. But my DNA of design is to communicate, inspire, and infuse an audience to reach their unique purpose. Sorry, that was a mouthful for you.
No, dude. But you also make me want to move to Mexico and work in your digital space there. It's snowing, and
Yes.
I'm looking out the window as it's snowing right now, and I feel like you have a way better environment too. So I can understand why
Yeah.
you would pursue that, dude. But that's when you talked about the things that you teach, but you also teach about clarity being surrounding us and how it's already there. Um, and when you're pointing that out to someone, like what are those first signs that someone should pay attention to when life's trying to get their attention?
Yeah, that's a loaded question, isn't it? Those first signs that come around us is, we've all heard of the phrase deja vu, right?
Yeah.
And when things start to repeat, then you know that there's a message. You know that there's something, there's a C-Link behind what's being communicated. Like if you have somebody knocking multiple times at your door and they're not stopping knocking, but it's a persistence. That tells me how I would interpret that as if it were a dream. Since we're on this topic, it's okay. That tells me this is something imminent, because someone only knocks once and they leave. It's like, all right, you left me a package, you left me my skip the dishes, you left me my food. But if someone's knocking repeatedly and they're not stopping, it means there's something being communicated. And I would encourage our audience where to start. If you're starting to see similar patterns or things that are happening around you, maybe you're going for a walk in the park and the same color car goes by that reminds you of something that you had when you were younger, where you loved that car, and it just reminded you of just stepping back and just taking a chill moment of just being relaxed and not being overrushed. Like, I know that's an abstract example. I just made that up in the moment, but just those little things that happen around you in your day by day. Or maybe you go to public transit, you go to the bus stop, and you see the same old guy that gets on the bus, that the same guy that takes the same seat, gets on and off day by day, the same guy. Well, maybe, just maybe, you're supposed to strike up a conversation with that man, and maybe he has something to teach you from the older generation, some wisdom to extract. Or maybe you're there in his life to share something that he needs to hear. Maybe he's been praying or asking God for a breakthrough or some sort of divine intervention, and you are the answer to that man's prayer. Perhaps it could be that. In your night season, so if we're going to shift from day awake time to night season, if you're starting to really dream in the night season, and now the definition, Jeff, and this is something that really just I chuckle at when I think of all the different workshops and conferences and conventions and places I've spoken in person and online. When I ask people this question, do you dream? And it's so amazing to me that the response for most people is no, I don't dream. But then when I dig deeper, and my team digs deeper and says, well, okay, by don't dream, what do you mean? And they say, oh, well, I don't have those long dreams that are like 3 or 4 paragraphs long or epic books. I'm like, no. Did you dream something? Even if it's like 2 sentences. Then they open up and say, yeah, I had this clip dream that was like 30 seconds long, and then I woke up and it was really short. Well, don't discount those dreams, because something that's small can still have layers upon layers of meaning behind that. And I want to ask you, Jeff, because I'm really, really curious. Do you dream a lot, like in the night season? Are you a dreamer?
Yeah, and then what I was going to pitch it back to you, but how do you know when that dream is random noise or versus something you would interpret? And I got a story I want to tell you whenever you're ready for that.
Sure,
Sure.
I'll
Let me
share
tell
on
you my
that.
dream. Let me
Sure.
tell you my dream that I was going to ask you about. So remember me
Yeah,
telling you this new podcast thing was Endodyne kind of. But you want to hear how I stumbled upon just the name Endodyne and started doing work on it. It was like, hey, nobody's using this, and started figuring out. So
sure.
I had a dream that I was receiving a patent. Like I was
Hmm.
like there was big words that said patent. And then my wife was having an affair with this dude named Nate with Endodyne.
Oh.
And I
Hmm.
was like, okay, this is very attention getting. So I was like, I need to go figure. I started looking, make sure there wasn't no Nate with Endodyne because me and him had a problem. But I just started researching it. So it was that the dream was that vivid. It was that eye catching or that provoking for me that I wanted to go research.
Hmm.
And when I found it, and started like, all right, what does this mean? I was like, wait a minute, this is exactly what I've been teaching. This is the work I've been doing. So that was kind of my dream. I was going to share with you um,
Hmm.
to see what your thoughts was on that, or if I was like, no, you don't need a podcast, you need a divorce lawyer, Jeff.
There's layers to dreams, and I would love to unpackage that for you if you'd be open to that. Sounds like you
Yeah, yeah,
are, and I think it would be very beneficial for the live audience, those who are
yeah.
listening right now, to just see how this works, because I'm an advocate and a big believer of show and tell, and this comes to dream interpretation as well. And I want to ask you a question first of all. Jeff, what does Nate mean to you? Like, if you could describe Nate, this person, Nate, what adjectives would you use to describe Nate?
You know, if my memory serves me right, he was. he was, but I made some funny videos messing with her about it too. So my my dream was just seeing those big words, like that big
Mm.
Indodyne word, and that his association. All I knew was he was supposed to be a man, or maybe,
Yeah.
I
Okay.
just knew that he was a distraction, right?
Yeah, I would. I don't have the meaning of the name Nate in front of me right now, but the reason why I asked it because I believe what you were seeing there was God was making you aware of within your patent that there is an energy or a force trying to stop you from pursuing. Well, this comes back to unique design, part of your unique design. And I'm not sure if you've heard of the phrase the Midianite spirit before. Have you ever heard of that phrase
Hmm.
before?
No.
So in the Bible, in the book of Judges, there is this enemy of God's people called the Midianites. And what the Midianites would do is they would come in a season, a specific season, where they would come and they would steal the harvest of the people. They would come and ravage the land, take the harvest, and they would take it back across their borders. And every time the harvest was ready to be harvested, the enemy would come, the Midianites would come, and they would take the harvest. Why do I say all that? Because I believe that whatever meaning is behind Nate, that Midianite spirit, you're seeing God's showing you the plan of the adversary, the enemy, to try to take your patent. And I think it's more or less just an awareness of be aware of those Nate figures that you may recognize in your life, not just Nate, but those Nate figures, and just be aware of when they could be coming close to you as you're developing your patent, your DNA of design, your business, your message. Because as you accelerate, there's always going to be a counter punch that will try to put you off path. And it's like the parable that Jesus talked about when he talked about the wheat and the tares. The wheat and the tares grow together. And when your patent rises, there's always going to try to be a kickback. But it's more or less God's giving you a perspective of as you pursue the DNA design, be aware of those Nate figures that would try to sweep in and take your harvest. But it's a good sign because you're becoming aware of what's going on around you as you develop your individual design.
Man, that's no, like I told you when we were warming up, man, it was stumble upon you and the dream work that you do, and just knowing some of those random things that I had, I was like, all right, this is going to be a fun conversation for us to have. I appreciate your insight on that. I had that feeling, right? Me being funny because I enjoy the comedy side of when I tell this story. I'm like, all right, let me tell y'all something. I can tell y'all without a doubt, there's no Nate with the company Indodyne on LinkedIn because I was looking for him. Um, but I agree with you from the other side of it. Is I felt like it was significant enough that it's because sometimes I have dreams and they're very vivid, but when I wake up, I don't necessarily remember them. This one was anchored. Like
Mm.
I'm telling Caleb about this story because it was such a powerful dream, and it seemed like it was
Yep.
meant to left a lasting impression.
Yeah. When did you have it? When did you have it?
It's been a couple months ago.
Recently.
Yeah, within the last, because I was doing, I've been doing some intuitive work with Nancy, like I was telling you, just some different type stuff. And this is one of the things that was born out of some of the work that I've been doing now, and just trying to figure
Good.
out, like I said, was I enjoy, I call it underlying issues. Like if I'm doing business coaching with a client, if I'm doing some leadership coaching, is most of
Yeah.
the time the front facing issue that the client is seeing, feeling that's disrupting them. Within 3 or 4 questions, I go, all right, hey, that's why you're here. But now let's get down to why you're really here. Let's talk about what's going on
Yeah.
with you. And yeah, right. So that's generally where all of my not all, but 9 out of 10 of my conversation takes me into. Wait a minute. Okay, yep. You need help with marketing. You need this. All right, I got it. Got it. What? All right, there's some troubles over here that's distracting you from executing all this stuff you already know how to do. That's why you're here. And they're like, oh, okay, well, how did you know that I was having issues? So that's just trying to sort my way through a little bit of that, dude. But you touched on
That's
something
good.
that you teed me up for what I want. You was talking about that DNA and design. and you're just conversing with me, and like I am way self-aware of like, all right, hold on here, hang on here, I see what you're trying to do type stuff. But like for yourself is when we're going to tell our audience and when we're speaking, we're going to create some content out of this for later. But what is that on that living in our DNA of design? What breaks folks out of that clone mindset and helps them start to realize and step into who they really are, Caleb?
Hmm. I would say it's the three C's. You have to start with the three C's, and this is something I speak about in my YouTube channel. Give a shameless plug for my YouTube channel,
Yeah, what is
youtube.com/@the-C-link. That's my YouTube channel. But the three C's are construct, conform, and contract. So there you have the connection. There's a construct that's built within our spirit, soul, and body, within our DNA design. There's a conform. Okay, so are we going to go off path, or are we going to be conformed into the image of God? Because that's what it says in Romans, right? Like Romans says, do not be conformed to the image of this world system, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Part of coming into your DNA design, and my DNA design, Jeff, and our audience, is to push against conformity. And how do we do that? By becoming transformed. What does trans mean? It becomes an ecstatic experience between ourselves and our higher power, between the creator, between God and our spirit, soul, and body. And finally, contract. So we have construct, conform, and contract. And this is one of the things that one of my great mentors emphasized to me over the years when he was alive. And he said, Caleb, he said, beware of covenants, contracts, and agreements, because they will dictate the course of your life. Be very careful of what you agree to and what you don't agree to, because what you agree to in the invisible becomes visible. What you push back against and disagree with will manifest one way or another. And so for people to start with that, how do we start within the own DNA of our design? I want to share a little story behind that, and that is Saul's armor. The Saul's armor principle. Jeff, have you ever heard of the Saul's armor principle before?
No, I don't think I have. Go ahead.
Yeah. The Saul's armor principle comes from the very famous story in the Bible, but also in history. It's well documented and has come to light previously, highlighted on Amazon Prime's series called The House of David. Now, I recommend this series because it's absolutely incredible, but it highlights the life of King David and his rise to power from being a shepherd boy to the next king of Israel. And he goes through this process of going from watching his father's sheep facing off against the lion and the bear, and finally he gets to serve food and bring food to his brothers who are on the front line fighting the Philistines. And you've got this big giant called Goliath, an epic story that I think many people have heard, whether you gone to church or not, whether you grew up in a Jesus following home like I did or whatever. Most people have heard the story of David and Goliath. And when David says, I'm going to fight the giant, this is the part of the story that most people either haven't heard or maybe haven't heard in a long time. And that is, Saul says, you can't fight him. He's like, he's done this since he was a boy. He says, well, God has watched over me when I fought off the lion and the bear, and the same God that rescued me will rescue me from the hand of this giant. And so finally, the king relents and says, you'll be our champion. But he says this, he said, before you fight the giant, you got to put on my armor. Put on my armor. And then when you put on my armor, then you're going to be successful. And so David tries on the armor, and David says, I can't wear this. I'm not built for this. This isn't the armor that I'm built for. And the king is like, well, you can't possibly go out there without armor. He's like, my faith in God combined with my staff and my sling, the same tools that God has given me from my youth, will serve me in this battle. And we all know the rest of history. David kills Goliath, and an entire nation changes. A course of history changes because David followed the DNA of his design. He didn't put on that armor, that conformity armor, that Saul's armor, but he followed his own design. And it goes back to the question that I asked at the beginning of our podcast here. What do you have in your hand? What do you have in your hand? Because that is what's going to help you as an audience who are listening right now start on your journey of DNA of design. What do you have in your hand that's specific to you that maybe nobody else has, but something that you mesh with? that is fits just like a glove, and develop that. Start developing that. That's how we can start to recognize those C links and how to develop that DNA of design. That's where I'd start, Jeff.
Man, that's awesome, dude. Um, what what would you like? Got your YouTube channel up, got your website up, got your Instagram up. What message wrap us up? What message do you want to leave with the audience? And how can they what do you want them to work with you? Do you want them to book you? Whatever you like to whatever you like to share with the audience as far as how folks that are troubled by this or struggling with this or whatever that might look like for you, Caleb. Go ahead and take a few minutes and let folks know about the work you do.
Sure. With the C link, my main purpose with the C link is to help people discover their unique purpose, their own unique DNA of design, spirit, soul, and body, because every person in the world was created in the image of God, male and female, and we have a individual purpose as people to pursue in our life, and to really see that out to the end of our days. And the C links that are communicated around us in our day by day, those divine nudges of intuition, as well as in the night season, dreams. And dreams, we only touched briefly on it, but we spend a third of our lives dreaming in the night season. Like, that's 20 years out of the first 60 of our life is spent in that dream state. There are so many codes to be unpackaged. And my passion is speaking about understanding mysteries of the night season. It's about speaking about history speaks, bringing people through history, bringing people through the early years of entrepreneurship, of innovation, the I of I principle, bringing people through the DNA of our design, spirit, soul, and body, through that method, and communicating to the audience with that. And if something resonated within you and you're like, man, I got to have that guy on my podcast, or I got to have that guy in my in-person events, because I don't just do podcasts online. Like, I love doing podcasts online. Don't get me wrong. I love doing what we're doing right now. But where I really shine is in front of live audiences. That's where I began this journey as a communicator, as a leader, as a spiritual strategist, as a dream interpreter, is in front of live audiences of dozens, hundreds, and thousands through the nations. And that is where I really come alive. So if you want to book me as a speaker for your next event or your podcast, then my details are in the chat there that Jeff has put up there within the C link, as well as my website, calebmatthews.net, youtube.com/@the-C-link. Please subscribe to my YouTube, because I'd love to bring you along the journey, to bring you motivational content. But really, I want to wrap this up with this, and that is kind of hooking back into the last part of your dream, Jeff, that I actually want to interpret, and that is Nate is kind of short for nature. There's a human nature that tries to intercept our God-ordained destiny and our DNA design, that tries to get in the way. Human nature is one of the greatest opposition and obstacles that we face. It can come through humans, and sometimes humans don't mean to do it, but human beings can really try to push us off course, which is why it's so key for us, audience, to not conform to an image that somebody else says that you should conform to. Align with the image that God says what you are, of who you are within the DNA of your design. So this is what I want to declare to you in the closing moments here on this podcast. And by the way, Jeff, I'm so thankful being on here, but I want to close it with these thoughts coming from my end. And that is, speak to your subconscious, because you can train your subconscious. You can train your subconscious, because your subconscious mind will listen to you whether you declare light or darkness over it. So I declare this to you, audience, wherever you are in the United States, in Virginia, in Canada, in Mexico, South America, North America, Europe, Asia, Africa, Australia, wherever you are in the world, wherever setting you are in, I want to declare this to you, that your DNA of design is meant to come forth in the earth, that your gift that God has placed within you, that's customized to you, that's in your hand, is meant to come forth. And I speak open doors, the open doors that God speaks about in Psalms 24. Lift up your head, O you gates. Be lifted up, you everlasting doors, that the King of glory may come in. Your gates, your census of your senses, that all of your senses within your spirit, soul, and body, your 5 senses in your physical being, your 5 senses in your emotional being, your 5 senses in your spiritual being, all of your senses would come aligned with the reality of who God says you are, who Jesus says you are, who the Spirit of life says that you are, encompassing your senses and guiding you on your path and your DNA of design, that you are going to reach everything that you are meant to reach in this life, in this vial of time, and nothing, no human nature, no man, no devil, no opposition can stop you from fulfilling your inheritance and your birthright. Maybe you're thinking right now, I come from a family where I was the first person off the ship to turn the generational line towards light. Maybe I had a dark upbringing. Maybe I had an alcoholic family. Maybe I had a family that was really deep into some really bad stuff. But you are the one to be the carrier. Somebody out there is listening right now needs to hear this. You are the carrier, and you can do it. If nobody else goes with you, you have God. God will never forsake you, never leave your side. And so I speak to you and speak to everyone in the audience that you will reach the purpose to which you've been created by God, and nothing can stop the purposes of heaven from coming manifest in your life at this time. And like King David at the end of his life, when he reached the end of his days, everything that he'd done, he was full of days at the end of his reign. And that is my prayer, and that's my declaration over you, that you, at the end of your course, many, many years from now, that you will be full of days, not half of days, not empty of days, not a quarter of days, but full of days. You will reach the purpose to which you've been created. So start today. Posture your heart towards heaven, towards the Spirit of God, to let God intercept your DNA of design, your spirit, soul, and body. Put your sails up. Like Sir Francis Drake, great navigator in the 1700s, 1800s. He said this in his great famous poem, "Disturb us, O God, where storms will show your mastery. Where losing sight of land, we will find the stars. Disturb us, O God, when out of the abundance of the things we possess, we have lost our thirst for the waters of life, and having fallen in love with life, we cease to dream of eternity, and in our efforts of a new earth, we have ceased to build the new heaven. Disturb us, O God, in this moment. We're losing sight of land, we will find the stars. Push back the horizons of our hopes and lead us into a future in faith, hope, and love." Thank you, Jeff, for having me on the show. Quite an honor.
Yeah, man. Way to wrap us up, brother. I appreciate that. Hope you have you back on here at some point in time. We can catch up. And folks, make sure you share this episode. Okay, Caleb, you cannot I don't think we can go through this and not realize the power of your episode and just the share value of this will that folks can get out of this. So make sure we share it with folks who need to hear it, and connect with Caleb and let him get him into your next event, and make sure you subscribe to his YouTube channel and just check out all the things he has to offer, man. I feel like I feel like we all end up around the people that we're supposed to be, and that's why I love promoting all my guests that come on my show and all those things. So I hope to see you soon, and keep going, man. I'm really excited to follow along with your path and all the cool things that you're doing, Caleb. So thanks for being with us today.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you very much for having me on the show. Thank you, audience. And just go out and start cultivating that your DNA of design within the spirit, soul, and body, and just really align with that Zoe life of God within your life. But thank you, Jeff. Thank you for having me on the show. Thank you for the gracious invitation. And I look forward to future episodes. And hey, maybe on the next episode, we can get some of the audience to share in the chat as well too, some dreams that they want interpreted, and we could do some live dream interpretation as well. I'd be down for that if you are.
Love to do that, man. We just need to. We'll get that on the books for a couple of weeks off, and I'll email everybody. We'll put that out and get some. Make sure we got some at least some pre stuff or what have you. Great idea, man. Thanks for being on.
Thank you very much.
Welcome to the Jeff Robinson Show.